You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with Damian Swaby.
If you know, you know. If you don't know, you're about to find out. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking to someone who was a co-writer of one of my favorite films of all time. A film that convinced me and gave me the mental space to think about my own filmmaking journey and the stories that I wish to tell, and how having a dialogue-driven film can really fulfill you as a filmmaker. Today on the podcast, I speak to an American writer and actress, best known for originating the story and characters in the Before Sunrise trilogy, with her writing on Before Sunrise in 1995 and Before Sunset in 2004. The trilogy is based upon characters she created with the fantastic writer-director Richard Linklater. This film is inspired by personal experiences. Linklater collaborated with Krizan, who previously appeared in his films Slacker and Dazed and Confused, to develop the screenplay. Before Sunrise also explores time and self-discovery. This film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on January 19th, 1995, and was released 8 days later. She is also an actress who's landed a number of small roles in films such as Cameron Crowe's sports romantic comedy drama, Joe Maguire, and shows such as Lois and Clark, The Newest Adventures of Superman, the TV movie Dukes of Hazzard, Reunion, and she also appeared in the drama Body Shots. And if you're a fan of Friends, she's also appeared in that show too, as a brief love interest of Joey. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Kim Krizan on Filmmaking Conversations with Damian Swaby. It's not every day I get to speak to a writer who has influenced my own filmmaking journey. Hi, Kim. How are you today?
I'm great, Damian. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I am doing fine. Sorry. And I've also been doing fine for a while now, luckily for me, in these times of COVID, whatever. But I'm so happy that you're here on the podcast to talk to me today. I've been a lover of your work for so many years, in so many different ways, for so many different reasons. So I'm so happy to speak to you. Even things like Final Draft, you know, I heard about yourself being associated with it, and I was like, I'm going to get Final Draft. That's it. I'm going to do it. So thanks so much for coming on and speaking to me. I really appreciate it. So earlier on in the introduction,
my pleasure, Dan.
of course, earlier on in the introduction, I spoke about you and who you are and what you've done and the type of quality work you've been associated with. But I've always wondered, have you ever got on a train and heard people speak in a different language and have arguments?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Fascinating. Yes, because then you don't understand the content so much, but you understand the tone and the gestures. And oh yeah, that's something I've experienced. Have you?
Yes, but unfortunately, I've only experienced it in London and in the UK. So when I'm growing up at a part of a situation, a country, and especially in London, it's very, very multicultural. You just kind of take it with a pinch of salt. But if I was away, for example, like when I've been in New York, some of the performers on the underground, you call it the subway, obviously, I'm just like, wow, these guys are amazing. And they do like there's groups and they do kind of dancing and tricks and all of that. So I'm very looking at that all and very aware of it. But I've never experienced looking at arguments in a certain way and thought to myself, the tone defines what they're arguing about, rather than me having to understand the words that people have actually said. So I've never been in a situation like that.
Yeah, and the gestures gestures too. One time there was an argument, or not, maybe it was not. It was a vehement conversation going on behind me on an airplane, and I could make out a word here and there, and I got the gist just from every 30 words there would be a word that I could make out. And I remember it was hilarious because they were very upset with the service on the airplane. And the woman was like, asking her husband to do something about it. And I remember, I love that. I love eavesdropping on conversations. Definitely.
Good. Whether you can understand them or not, like you said, you eavesdrop and you learn so much from people in different ways. So you've traveled around the Europe, on a train and experienced so much. So what exactly made you think about putting these experiences in a feature film?
When Richard Linklater asked me to write a film with him, all he had at that point is that he wanted us to write some kind of boy-girl film, and that's all he had. And when we got together that very first night to talk about our story, I suggested to him that we consider putting it on a train because his films are generally sort of finite, how they take place maybe in one night or a 24-hour period or something like that. Mm. And I thought, well, gosh, I've had these experiences on trains, traveling alone on trains. The first time I did that was all over the UK. And the second time I did it, it was all over Europe. And then I did it again later in Europe. But those are finite experiences because you're sitting in the train car and maybe someone comes and sits across from you and maybe you have a fantastic conversation and it might go on for hours. And before you have to part ways, or maybe you decide to get off the train with the person and hang out for the day. So I suggested that as a way to have parameters on the story.
I see. That makes sense. So going into the story, when you're sitting down and writing the screenplay together, there's a lot of movement while they're walking and talking. Were things set in stone, like at the fun fair, like at the place where they got red wine for free, which was just a lovely scene? Were all of these things set in stone, or did you just have ideas that sometimes they'd be moving and walking by a fun fair, maybe potentially sitting down and getting their palm read, and maybe sitting down and being in a situation where they have red wine and they're able to move again, walking and talking? Or was it a very open process where you said they shouldn't just be sitting down in one place, like in potentially some of your other films?
It was quite open. What we did have were specific conversations, and we didn't exactly know where those conversations would take place because we weren't sure where the movie was going to be shot. That was a matter of getting funding, and Linklater ended up getting the funding in Vienna. So that brought a whole new thing, because then he would need to go scout locations and find specific locations. So it was a matter of us having specific conversations. Now, there were some things that were written into the script. For example, the palm reader was written in because when we wrote the movie in 1993, I was particularly interested at that point in the whole metaphysical thing. And, I was reading books on palm reading and astrology and the whole psychic world. And so I wanted to write that in because I thought that was romantic, And the other thing was the belly dancer. because I was studying belly dance. And so I specifically wrote in a belly dancer. And I tried to get my belly dance teacher a part. It turned out it was kind of expensive to have her flown all the way to Vienna just for that one little part. So they found someone in Vienna. But there were some specifics that made it so that we had to find maybe certain characters in Vienna to play the parts, or in Europe to play the parts. But there was a lot of there was a loose quality to the locations and whether they'd be walking or sitting or drinking wine, It was more about the conversations.
Brilliant. The conversations are amazing. They're just like spot on.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed them. If you love dialogue-driven films, especially, this is the film for you in that way. And I always wonder, when conversations are so on point and they feel so personal in so many ways, who is in the writing? And what I mean by that is, how much of you, Kim, is a part of Céline's character?
Yeah, a lot of me goes into Céline, definitely. I think that Linklater probably asked me to write with him because I knew him for a few years at that point. He had cast me in his movie Slacker, and we got to know each other and became friends. And then he put me in Dazed and Confused as the teacher. But at the point he asked me to write with him, we had developed a friendship where we had had a lot of conversations. Our thing was going and playing pinball together. We played pinball, which made it in the
Really?
Which made it in the movie, right? But we had, we had a relationship in which we would just toss ideas around. I was always reading books. He was always reading books and thinking about this idea or that philosophy, or, so it was very, very much the way we conversed, and was very much who I was. And then, of course, later the actors came into the picture and they brought their personalities. But I would say, to a large degree, so that that Céline character is me, and then of course I did write a few lines here and there for Jesse, and Linklater wrote a few lines probably here and there for Céline, but to a large degree that's me.
Oh wow, that's very interesting. So you would be in a situation when you would be speaking to your parents and you would say, I want to be one thing. For example, if you say you want to be an actor, they would say, be a weather girl.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I mean, my parents are very kind of practical people. They were born, at a time in the 20th century when you wouldn't be fanciful about your career choices, right? And so they saw things right? I mean, so I remember my father talked to me about being a newscaster, a weather girl. He's an engineer, and my mother was a nurse, and, he thought I should work in an office. I remember he talked to me about being a dentist. It's like, do I have is there any suggestion at all that I could do that sort of thing? No, but, absolutely, they would, here, because I wanted to be a writer, and I liked animals, and I was very good with art and things like that. And I was very good with reading books and seeing the symbols. And I don't think they understand that kind of thing at all. So they would be like, working in an office, doing this paperwork, and it'd be like, God, I would hate that. I'd absolutely hate that.
Oh yeah, I completely understand that. Yeah, it's very different from the creative process that many of us go through. And it's interesting that you say Richard Linklater put a lot of himself into Jesse, the character Jesse, played by Ethan Hawke, because there's a lot of amazing lines that come from Jesse. And one of them that comes to mind is when he says, "I saw this place where I was never meant to be," meaning basically being born and being alive. When that line comes into the film, that comes from Richard, I'm guessing. But how is it discussed between the two of you as writers?
Well, you know what comes to mind as you say that? I don't remember specifically writing that line, but Richard Linklater he's from the middle of Texas where there wasn't a film scene at all. He kind of created the film scene in Austin, Texas. He and a few friends of his, Lee Daniel and a few friends, and he was, I think he told me that just growing up, he immersed himself in films. He became just an expert of sorts in films and created this whole vision for his life. He didn't go to college. He did not get a university degree. He just kind of forged his way. And, he told me like he had a stepfather who was a construction worker, and another stepfather who was some sort of businessman. He didn't want those things. So I think he, in a sense, he created himself, and to a large degree, I have created myself. And I suppose when you're a person immersed in the arts, as we are and we were, I guess it gives you that kind of freedom to think of creating yourself. And maybe it opens you up to options, and maybe in a certain way you're able to sidestep what is supposed to be your destiny. If his destiny was to be a construction worker or a businessman, and mine was to be, an office worker or a weather girl, we managed to sidestep that and choose something else for ourselves.
That many people are not able to sidestep those type of situations. If you were a dentist or an office worker, do you think you still would have been able to have had that mental space, let alone the time to do it, the mental space to be able to write and be a creative?
Yeah. Well, you know what? The way I kind of survived my childhood and my adolescence, which were not the greatest, was I had quite the fantasy life. I definitely went in my head and created like stories, characters, whole sagas. I remember like being kind of forced to sit in church for a million years and not enjoying it. And I remember I had a dance choreography that I worked on in my head. And every sermon, I would try to, add another step to the choreography. So I think maybe some people, and a lot of us probably, it's like, that famous story, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. It's a great, great story. Isn't it? It's great, right? Yeah. I think we brilliant, right? I think we probably, many of us, if not all of us, survive on our fantasy lives. And and I don't even think I think animals might do that too, because when I see my cats dreaming, they're definitely having dramas in their dreams. Like I can see that they're like running and they're fighting. Yeah, they're fighting, and they have whole fantasy lives too. So I guess that's the way living things, like we must fulfill ourselves in some way by just doing the things we want to do in our heads. And so if I were working in a dentist's office, or if I were in an office, for sure, I would have a fantasy life, doing all the things I wanted to do. And I still do. I still have a fantasy life doing the things I want to do. You know what I mean? So I think we're all like that.
What is your fantasy life? Because from the outside looking in, it looks like you are having the life you want.
Oh, well, to some degree I am. But, you can't, not everybody has everything they want. And so, I definitely get through hard times by embellishing a lot and definitely tweaking reality to a large degree. I imagine scenes a lot. I imagine conversations a lot. Or another thing I like to do is I replay. I do a lot. Memory is really important to me, which is probably why this movie came about, because, Before Sunrise dealt to a large degree with memory and then embellishing and tweaking the memory. So I replay things a lot and try to deep focus in on certain aspects of a memory and really try to remember the details of what was there that I really liked. I also think since I'm doing this, this writing class on Patreon, I have my students, I have my students do an exercise to help them with their creativity. Because a lot of times we're blocked because of bad memories and we're criticized harshly, and then we're fearful till the end of time. If someone criticized something you've written, or you were in choir when you were a child and the choir teacher said something horrible to you about your singing, that creates a block. That memory creates a block, and then you're afraid to sing for the rest of your life, or you fear criticism, or you're afraid to sit down and write. So I have my students do this exercise where they dredge up the memory, and this is very painful to do, but they write out the memory. And then what they do is they graft on a new ending to the memory where they're telling the person off and telling them why they're wrong and going into great detail about why they're wrong. And what that does is that goes into the memory, but it turns it around so that instead of it being a painful memory, it then becomes, well, I defended myself and I told them they were wrong. And so now I'm free to sing again or write again or whatever the thing is. So one thing I think I do is I zero in on specific aspects of memories a lot and replay for myself, maybe the most pleasurable moments. And if I guess if there's a painful moment, maybe I try to find a new ending to it,
Oh, good. I'm glad. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm happy for you in that regard. But I think about the romantic projections that Ethan Hawke's character discusses in the film. Mm-hmm. Because you've got a good memory and you're a writer, how does that affect what you're writing in terms of romantic projections?
Well, you have to take poetic license, and you have to. So for example, when I was traveling by train, I did not have that exact experience that's in Before Sunrise, but I had experiences where, say, I met a guy on a train and we had a fantastic conversation. And we got off the train and we walked around Paris for a while. And then we went back to the train station. I put him on the train and he took off for his homeland. Well, the things that happened in Before Sunrise didn't exactly happen in my real life. But I could extrapolate from some of the good things that happened in real life, expand upon them, romanticize them. I could say, remember meeting a guy at a concert in London at Wembley Stadium, and we kind of liked.
What concert?
It was Bob Dylan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we liked each other, and I can remember that, and I can remember certain expressions and certain things we said. So I can extrapolate from there and romanticize it and turn it into a whole thing, So
in terms of taking romantic license, when Judy says, isn't everything we do in life a way to be loved a bit more? Is that poetic license, or is that from the heart as a writer who's personally connected to the character?
I think that's from the heart. I think, well, she's being a bit philosophical, and she's wondering, I think, about what motivates us. And, whether she's right or wrong, I don't know, but I think she's I definitely think that a lot of our motivation in life is to be loved or to be, maybe seen and heard. And I mean, I'm even as we're talking about this, I'm even thinking about some of the horrible things people do, like horrible things, like the guy who murdered John Lennon. You know what I mean? Or some of these atrocities in America. I think sometimes these horrible crimes are committed because someone just wants to be seen and recognized. So I guess that takes loved out of the equation, but they want to be seen and recognized. And now, till the end of time, we will all remember that John Lennon was murdered by this, mentally ill guy. And so I think that she was playing with that idea. I think it was from the heart that she said that. And I definitely, for me, I mean, I think to a large degree, that's a motivation for me, would be to be loved, writing things to be loved. I mean, you're also trying to tell a truth. You want to be true. You want to be true to yourself, but you also want others to see and hear what you're doing and to love you a little more. So yeah, she's, I think, considering that as an idea.
A great idea. And was this a situation where yourself and Richard were writing for a number of hours, a number of days? Was there a lot of discussions on the phone, or it was a case of a long period of writing together?
So we first got together in my house. This was at night. And we brainstormed for, I think it was about 5 days or maybe a week. And we both had our notebooks and we were just tossing ideas around. And at the end of that period, we sat down on my floor with a big poster board and we had index cards, and we knew that certain conversations were going to take place over the course of the movie. So we would write the, basic conversation on a index card, and we were moving the index cards around and trying to create some order. After we had created some order, we taped everything down, and then for the next week, we went to his apartment because he had a computer. I did not yet have a computer in 1993 when we wrote it. And so he had a computer, and he may have even been using Final Draft. I think so. And so he put a big poster board with the conversations up on the wall above his computer. And then what we did is we each took turns sitting down and typing. And very often I was typing Céline's lines and he was typing Jesse's, though sometimes we might have switched a little bit. But while, say, he was sitting down and typing Jesse's lines, I was pacing around his apartment. This was at night. So this was late at night, which is a great time to write because it's so quiet, And we were, so I would be pacing around, and then he would get done and he would stand up, and then I would sit down and I would write for a bit. And at some point, like after we'd worked for a few hours, we would walk down to the convenience store, and he would get a symphony bar, which was a chocolate bar. I don't know if they make it anymore. But so he would get a chocolate bar, and I would get a tab, which they recently discontinued. Did you get tabs? Here comes my cat. There's my cat. Did you guys? Did you guys?
No, we didn't get them.
It was a beverage. So tab was a beverage.
Coca-Cola tab.
Yeah. It was in a hot pink can. Yeah. I would get a tab. Yeah. They recently discontinued it. It was just so sad. So I would get a tab, and he would get a chocolate bar, and then we would walk back. So we had a little walk every night that we were working. And I suppose during the walk we were taking a break, but we were also talking about the story. So then we would come back to his place and continue working. So we worked late at night, and that was for another week or so. So it all happened very, very quickly. The script was written quickly.
But why exactly would you get a tab, and why would he get the chocolate bar? Was it just to have a break, or?
It was to get, we needed the break. I suppose I needed a tab because it was highly caffeinated and I'm not really a night person. And we were working late at night. And I think he is more of a night person. And I think he just likes chocolate. So that we probably just needed sustenance at that point.
And one thing I kind of think about as well is when you both sat down to do this project, there's certain lines in it when Jesse says marriage is about they lose energy and you end up being with this guy and you regret it. You think about the guy you should have been with. At that time in your lives, what was going through your heads to be able to write such a line?
So at that point in 1993, so I had a boyfriend at that point, and I believe Rick had a sort of a girlfriend at that point. But I think Ethan probably wrote that line. Both Ethan and Rick were the products of divorced parents. And so I think they were quite cynical about love. And yeah, I would say they were. And I was not that. I think I was realistic to some degree. I don't believe I was quite so cynical. So that was either Rick or Ethan that wrote that line, and it sounds to me like an Ethan line.
They're both from Texas, I think. I'm right by saying.
I think so. Yeah.
Potentially had the same upbringing. Yeah. So they can come together and create lines like that they agree with and they resonate. I mean, I'm in London. I'm not, and that line resonated with me. So it's a kind of universal way of connecting with people emotionally and mentally in that way. And when I watched the film, I mean, one of the things I think about, which was great back in the day, I say, because even myself, I would jump on a train when I was Jesse's age and make conversations with people. It felt like it was easier and it's something that could be done. But now when we jump on a train, we see people obviously always looking down on their phone.
Yeah.
And especially on the London Underground, some networks allow you to have internet connection on the subway. So no one's looking at each other and no one's talking and no one's interacting and no one's ever going to say anything. And if they're not talking, they've got headphones on and they're listening to music, I guess, or podcasts, which isn't a bad thing. So how do you think you would have been able to have written some of the core elements of this film in 2022 or 2020, or as long as we've had smartphones in our pockets? The differences, I imagine, would be amazing. Even as they walk and talk and end up in different places, when they pick up the phones and start saying, imagine I'm your best friend and everything. How do you think it would work in the day of smartphones?
Oh my God. Internet? Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think the internet is changing us profoundly because, when I was traveling by train, I mean, I always had books. My backpack was full of books, but much of the time I was staring off into space. I was watching people. I mean, there was so much mental downtime back in the day, and I was watching people so much of the time that it would be a whole different thing nowadays to connect with people. It'd be much, much harder. I mean, so many people now are connecting via the smartphone, which is a whole scary world to me. That's a very scary thing, because don't you need the animal experience of being like with we're animals, right? So don't you need the animal experience of being with someone and then like you smell their pheromones and you kind of know whether, like all that stuff, like really being able to sincerely discover who they are and more that subconscious animal thing. I don't know how they would today. I guess that, I mean, I find that today people, when you meet somebody, say in a coffee shop to have an interaction, I think it's even harder for people to make eye contact now. it's
Yes.
I think our brains are changing, and our brains are changing. And I'm guessing that it's much the same way our brains changed when we developed writing and we developed language to begin with. I mean, it's like we're stepping out of a certain animal sort of existence. Like they say that when we developed language, that then certain parts of our brains that had been very awake, because we were, before language, we were reading one another through gestures, through the tone so much, that when you substitute, say, words that where you could read the symbols, it changed our brains. And then we had written language. And, back then when they developed written language, those people complained bitterly that written language was making everybody lose memory, because they said we all used to remember things, but now we can write things down so we don't have to remember. And the older generation complained bitterly, like, you young people with your written language, now you don't remember anything. So now people my age complain bitterly about younger people with their smartphones, and like, you guys don't even look at each other. You're always on your phone and you're swiping left, right, and so it would be a whole new ballgame now. How would people connect? And I mean, we could find a way, but it'd be a different sort of thing now. It would be different because some of these skills are being lost. Some of these
Completely.
The connection thing,
completely being lost, and sadly, the end of the film, which I love. When they're about to get on the train and they're debating, and she says 3 years, he says 6 months. There's that type of situation happening. And now I just think that the ending, obviously, you've written the film with Richard Linklater, so I'm not pretending that I'm a part of it in that way. But I look at it and I think the ending just couldn't have happened in that way, because somewhere along the line, he would have said, "Are you on Instagram?"
Right.
And she would have said, "Yeah, are you on Twitter?"
Yeah.
So that in a way, it doesn't end.
Oh,
even if they don't want to meet up.
Yeah. But, this is fascinating because I do realize a certain romance is lost because, for example, the people I met on my train travels, I never saw again. I didn't even know a lot of, their last names, things like that. And so they exist in my memory or maybe I have a photograph or something like that. But I have to say, like some of these relationships that we develop via social media, like on Instagram, some of these are very profound, even though, I have certain connections. Here comes the kitty. I have certain connections. I have certain connections on Instagram that, I don't know where the person lives or how old they are or whatever, but there's a certain profound quality to our little conversations. And, I feel like it's human beings sort of touching one another through space. And I feel like it's developing new parts of my brain or my psyche that were lying dormant before and are now becoming activated.
Wow.
So, you know what I mean? It's like a new thing like comes to life via this whole social media deal. It's really weird.
Yeah, it is really weird. And I completely understand where you're coming from because I've had and been a part of those experiences. But earlier on, when you said not knowing people's surnames and just kind of leaving that moment as it is and what it was and remembering it, that's something special. And do you think that's something you'd like to go back to? Because there are so many people, maybe myself and mutual friends, we speak about and say, remember that time we went to Manchester? We spoke to those people. Remember that time we was in Amsterdam? And we don't know their surnames. And it's just kind of like left in this certain lovely, memorable box.
Yeah.
And we just bring out that box of memories now and then. And it's something maybe nice to go back to rather than knowing their surname and connecting with them online, but not really connecting, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. It is really nice. There's a certain like memory is a great thing. And it is really nice to have those memories. I used to sit and listen to people's conversations a lot. And I noticed that nowadays, like I was on a plane just yesterday, and I noticed like everybody's on their phones and they're not observing what's going on around them. And what's going on is often fascinating, but we're so used to now, we need the constant stimulation. We're addicted to the constant stimulation. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. Like those memories, and there's no way to contact them, and they're special memories, and then there are people I have special memories about or for, and I do know them on, say, Instagram, but I kind of would rather remember them as I knew them then,
Yeah, exactly. And it's a nice thing in that way. So exactly, I completely understand what you mean. But in terms of memories and everything, one thing I do when I go on holiday, I've mentioned it before, I never turn my phone on. I have it to take photos and video. And a lot of the times on Sundays, I leave my phone at home for the day just to not be a part of that world. So, for example, yesterday was Saturday. I was in a Czech Republic bar around where I live. It's around the corner from where I live. And it is a tiny bar. It's tiny. And you're almost forced to interact with people. And things like that. That's the closest I can get to maybe, say, 1998, before the explosion of phones and smartphones and things. Is there any point in your life, especially as a writer, where you can go back to 1998 and not be connected in the way that we are now across everything in the world?
Yeah, well, I think that's really smart of you to do that, to turn your phone off, because creative people need to observe the world around them. And it's very healthy for you to observe the world around you. But I tell my students that it's really good to take breaks from their phones and just listen to what's going on. I think that's really good. Yeah, I do the same thing. Sometimes I turn it off or I leave it at home. Because I want to, and for God, it's almost like it, because of the addiction of the thing. Sometimes you go through a withdrawal, after here she comes, you go through a withdrawal, do you know what I mean? Where you're kind of antsy and you're like, what's going on? Am I missing something? But when you finally calm down, like one of the greatest things ever is if you go to a vacation spot where you can't connect. And first of all, like and the first day you're coming off of the addiction of the phone and you feel sort of irritable, but then you start calming down. And what I find is that I just start being able to sit there, watch what's going on around me. I can read a book. It's like my brain slows down and gets deeper and deeper and deeper. Do you know that they call the generation, this social media generation, do you know that they call them the shallows?
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I think I can understand why.
Yeah. Everything is on the surface. So. Yeah. And if you don't have the phone and you're reading a book or you're observing around, your brain actually goes much deeper. Like your thoughts go very deep. So like one thing I have my students do is I make them do their writing exercises by hand. I don't let them use electronic devices because they're like, why not? They're like, my handwriting is so bad. I don't care. The thing is they've wired people up to see what the brain does when you write by hand versus when you're on the computer. And the thoughts go much, much, much deeper when you write by hand. Like, why would that be?
That's amazing.
I don't know why.
I don't know either, but like my notes here, they're all handwritten.
Yes.
Yeah. I've never thought about it on that level. Yeah.
You're thinking more deeply. You know that.
That's amazing. I hope more people do the same because, as we say, things that have affected things in such a way, there's a generation basically called the shallows. And how do these shallows behave and interact in terms of relationships and in terms of the relationship that these two characters in Before Sunset had, I was amazed looking back at the film and thinking it took so long for them to have a conversation and even Hawke's character to break the ice and say, so do you have a boyfriend? I mean, how did that happen? Because it felt so natural.
Do you think that people now ask that question right away? Is that like right away?
I think it's not right away, but it's a part of the are you on Twitter or Instagram type conversation. Because if someone has a boyfriend or a girlfriend, 9 times out of 10, it's kind of like that whole selfie picture of them to, just went to so-and-so having a great time, love life and all the rest of it. It's a part of that type of thing. But because of the conversation these characters were having, they weren't really having silly small talk. I love the bit on I think it's a tram they're on when they were the fight, the questions they had at each other. But it was felt so natural that they didn't have to go into, do you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend? I felt that was very unique because I believe people get into that situation a lot faster, especially when, they fancy each other. Yeah.
What do they do though when they're really shy? I mean, because, in that scene on the tram, they're awkward. Jesse and Céline are awkwardly trying to get to know one another because they know that they like each other and they're not exactly sure how to do it. So nowadays, what do people do when they're really shy and they're awkward and they're trying to get to know one another? Does the internet, does it give them a layer of protection or does it strip away the protection and expose them? You know what I mean?
But I know what you mean, but I think with the internet, what happens is people are building profiles for what they want to be. So if you're not the type of person like, if you're not the type of person like Jesse who's gonna speak to someone on the train and literally come back and say, hey, let's get off the train and continuously talk, then you're not going to have any interest in him or vice versa, whatever. So if you're online and you're connecting, it's all about your profile already. So there's that kind of angst or shyness is not going to exist because you get this whole picture perfect profile of someone that you can converse with. So it really throws things in a different way. Yeah. It's
a mask. It's the persona. So it's a mask that they've built that it may or may not be true. It is idealized and romanticized. Yeah. I actually saw the mask of somebody. It was their profile. They put somebody I know put their profile up on some dating site and I saw it and it was like, oh my God. They're like, everybody loves my smile. I'm thinking this is the meanest person, and they're like, my smile. It's like, actually, no, but that's how they saw themselves and they wanted to be seen. And I was like, God, he's not presenting himself honestly, either because he doesn't know himself or because he's intentionally creating a mask that is, palatable for people. But yeah, see, that's scary, that false mask stuff. Right?
It's very scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you get to a situation where you're a part of writing the second film, you've gone through this fantastic journey with everyone. People have grown, just the nature of time. Was it in any way daunting to be a part of it another time around because of the success of the film and the growth of the people personally and professionally?
Yeah, it was daunting. When Linklater first asked me to write the sequel, I was a little bit afraid because the first movie, you never know when you write a movie, if first of all, if it's going to get made, because it's so difficult to get a movie made at all. I mean, it's a total long shot to get a movie made. It's very difficult to get the funding and you don't know if you, so it ended up being made and people liked it. And I thought, oh God, maybe we shouldn't mess with this because we could really screw it up. You know how many movies have been totally screwed up with a bad sequel. And so that was very frightening. I was a little bit worried about it, but then he said, we're definitely doing it. And so I was on board, and then he and I started working on it, and we had to ask ourselves, where would they be in their lives at this point? You know, it was about 7 years after we'd written the first movie that we sat down to write this second movie. And it was in at that point, his new condo. And, you know, he had had some successes at that point. And so he has more under his belt as far as artistic success. I had more under my belt as far as life experience. I was married and we were older. There was perhaps, you know, we were more cynical, perhaps more realistic. We also realized that, you know, it's kind of rare to meet somebody that you really like. And it's rare to connect. You know, when you're young, you think you're going to connect with a lot of people, but maybe at the end of your life, when you're laying on your deathbed or something, maybe you just look back and there were maybe just a handful of people that you really, really, really connected with and remember and had that sort of deep feeling for. So maybe the characters at that point realized shouldn't have let that slip through our fingers. So there was that.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because there's a bit where they're on a small boat, as far as I can remember. And I'm pretty sure they have that discussion about, why do you think there'll be someone else? Like when you're young, you think, okay, that this relationship didn't work, or, you know, what happens with that person's happened, but there'll be someone else. And a lot of the times there won't be.
The young don't know they're young. They don't know they're young. They don't know that certain things are limited, finite, and are only going to happen a number of times, that they better make smart decisions. You know how young people don't want to be trapped and limited. And so, you know, they just don't know what's going to unfold. And so certain opportunities come around, and then later, you know how it is, later you go, God, I should not have rejected that opportunity. Or you think, I should not have done that because that set the tone for a certain thing that was going to happen for the next 5 years that I didn't want. So you just don't realize when you're young, you know?
No, you don't. Like the old saying goes, youth is wasted on the young. You know, it's
absolutely.
And going back, if you could change anything in that script from Before Sunset, what would it be?
I think there are some moments where I would make it a bit more poetic or romantic. I think they were going, I think there were some points where they were going for some realism. And I think, you know, I'm all for realism, but I don't think that hope, idealism, romanticism are necessarily bad things. So I think that I would probably polish some of the lines, and I think that my particular contribution, say to Before Sunrise, was a certain poetic sort of quality that is lessened a bit in the second movie. And so I think I would add more of that to the second movie. That's my honest answer.
Okay, that's fine. It's wonderful that what you said. Food for thought is what I'm thinking of right there. And you've mentioned your students. What type of students do you have, and who are you teaching?
Well, I've been teaching writing and creative writing and screenwriting for a long time. It's sort of a day job of mine, but also it's a sanity thing, because sitting and writing at home, you know, one gets a little bit insular. And so it's good for me to get out of the house and see people like we're talking about, like see people face to face. And so just these last months, I've started this new teaching venture. Because of the pandemic, I could not meet people in my normal way in the classroom. So I started this online writing class. It's on Patreon. It's called The Magic Hour with Kim Krizan. And people can find it by going on Patreon or going on my Instagram. I'm on Instagram, Kim Krizan. But it's a writing class, and there are different levels. It's very inexpensive. But I lead students through creative writing exercises, and it's fun. You know, it has my whole take on creativity, and we're going to start getting into some serious screenwriting pretty soon. So it's a new venture for me, the Magic Hour. It's called the Magic Hour because when I sit down to do creative my work, sometimes I go into that magic space. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Where you go into this magic space where time sort of falls away. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I want to get my students into that wonderful magic place. It's really like this. I love being in that space of creativity, and so that's what I'm trying to accomplish for my students in my online class on Patreon.
So this is brilliant. It's an online class that anyone from around the world can join.
Oh yes.
Okay. So that's great. So in the show notes, I'm going to put.
Yeah, there are 3 different levels, so it's very inexpensive. You could join at whatever level you want. That'd be great. I would love to put it in the show notes.
Great. I'll be putting that in the show notes and link to the
Thank
films
you.
we've been speaking about today, and a lot more regarding Kim and her wonderful journey and her creative mind and spirit and thoughts and things. I love keeping up with what you're doing on Instagram as well as everything else. So Kim, thank you so much.
Yeah, we met on Instagram.
Yes, we did.
My pleasure. We met via social media, right?
Yes, I completely remember. And I'm also sure if we were on the train, we would have just had a chat. Maybe I would have been arguing in a foreign language. Maybe I would have been reading a book, whatever, you know. Maybe I would have been eating.
We would have had a great chat, probably about films, right? Would we have talked about films?
We would have first spoken about the book you would have had, because I know you had paperback books, and I'm a big reader. So if I saw you reading, I may have said, "Oh, what's that you're reading?"
That'd be a lot of fun. I would love talking to you on a train.
Yeah, it would have been great. What books are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading a book by Marilyn Monroe's masseuse.
Oh.
It finally came out. I have been waiting for this book forever because Ralph Roberts, they pronounced it Rafe Roberts. He was one of her very, very best friends in the whole world, like one of her core best friends. She had so much trouble with insomnia that he was basically with her every single day trying to get her relaxed so that she could sleep. And in the course of doing the massages, she would tell him all about her life and her marriages and her work problems and everything. And so he was a best friend, and she would talk to him in the middle of the night sometimes when she was suffering from insomnia. I have been waiting for his book to come out forever. It's called Mimosa. And because it's been a long time coming. And so when I just saw that book came out, I jumped on that opportunity because he's got some of the deep background on what it was to be friends with Marilyn Monroe.
See, that's great, because I didn't expect you to say something like that, but I knew it'd be something I didn't expect. That's great. I'll definitely look out for that one. Definitely.
Yeah.
So Kim, thanks a lot so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll speak soon for sure.
So much fun, Damien. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for asking me.
If you liked this podcast, share it with friends. Leave a comment in the comment section and hit the subscribe button.